Welcome to Inner Peace Better Health, the podcast where we explore what it truly means to live in alignment with yourself, your relationships, and your purpose. I'm your host, Saima, and today I'm honored to welcome Dr. Michelle R. Hanna, a best selling author, personal and business relationship coach, and inspirational speaker whose expertise in self worth, personal development, and spiritual well being has transformed countless lives. She's the author of the Self Woes series, The Breaking Point, The Woes, and most recently, the highly anticipated Access Denied, Access Granted, a book that challenges us to ask who gets access to our energy and emotions? How do we reclaim our self worth after heartbreak or rejection? And how do we stop giving access to people and habits that don't serve our highest good? Now, if you've ever struggled with setting boundaries, breaking cycles, or redefining your relationships, this conversation is for you. So let's get into it. Dr. Michelle, your book title alone is really powerful. So, what inspired you to write Access Denied, Access Granted?
What inspired me to actually write that is honestly, it came from just a place of spiritual connection that I just felt like I needed to get out what was on my heart. So that's how it started. And I went to Utah for about 3 days and I just wrote. And so even though I had the title, I didn't really know how the book would actually transform, but it did. In those 3 days, I just wrote and wrote. I hardly got any sleep. And honestly, after I wrote the book, I wrote so fast that I really didn't know all what I wrote. And then once I got back in town, um, I went to the doctor. I had got some news that was very shocking, and had to go into an emergency surgery. And while I was healing from that surgery, I began to read the entire book that I had written. And I realized that while I thought this book was just another book that I was writing, a beautiful book, but to the public, I had no idea that I wrote this book for me because I was going to need it in preparation for now this very tough journey that I was about to face.
hmm So, how does understanding who and what we allow in our lives change our personal growth journey?
I'm sorry, say it again.
hmm How does understanding who and what we allow in our lives change our personal growth journey?
Well, I believe that when we are self aware of who we are, it will absolutely change your journey. Your direction will be absolutely different. When we are unaware of who we are and what we need and what we desire and honestly what we want, when we're unaware of that, our direction is based off of uncertainty. It's based off of not being clear. It's based off of confusion. But once we are absolutely self aware, we begin to get very clear about not only what we want to do, but what we need to do.
That's such an empowering shift, Michelle, that realizing that we have the authority to decide who and what gets access to our energy, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's the beautiful thing about this book is that I realized that a lot of the things that I was doing in life was maybe connected to what my parents wanted, people that I respected, what maybe they wanted, what they thought that I should do, maybe not necessarily what I actually should be doing for me. And so I needed to give access in the proper areas, meaning that people needed to be put in the proper areas in terms of access. So, for example, just because someone is absolutely just intellectually brilliant and you're just absolutely honored that they have access to your life, but then that person may not have the capacity to have access to the emotional part of you. And so that's very important to figure out who and what should have access, and then what area should they have access to.
Absolutely. So many people struggle with repeating the same relationship patterns. So why do you keep granting access to people who don't deserve it?
I think the reason why we keep granting access to people that don't deserve it is because we need to do our self work first. There's parts of ourself that we even need to deny access to. So, for example, our self sabotage, the imposter syndrome, um, negativity, negative self talk. So, first, we need to figure out what about myself do I need to deny that access? And when you deny the access, it absolutely aligns you with access granted. So, the second step is then, okay, let me do an audit of my life with my friends, with my projects, with my family, and then figure out, okay, who do I need to deny access to? Maybe totally, or who do I need to deny access to that may have access to me in areas that I'm not comfortable with, or they don't bring me peace in those areas. So someone can bring you peace emotionally, but when it comes to maybe discussing your vision and your goals, you may not have peace with them in that way. So I think figuring out, and I would really recommend doing a access denied, access granted vision board, divided up into four areas: emotional, physical, intellectual, and spiritual. And then begin to really sit with the projects you're involved with, the people that you are involved with, whether that is professionally or personally. And when you think about that person's name in that particular area, and really sit with it and listen to your intuition. If you don't get peace, anything other than peace, anything other than joy, anything other than happiness or inspired motivation, so basically positivity, then I think you need to figure out, okay, is this person in the wrong area? Or maybe the person just doesn't need to have access to you at all in this particular season.
That's really noteworthy, Michelle. Now, can you share the first step to breaking that cycle and setting stronger emotional boundaries?
Well, I would say the first step is, again, I think all roads lead back to self. I think it's first setting your own personal boundaries emotionally, for yourself. And then once you set them for yourself, then start to think about the people that are involved in your life emotionally, and then start to think about what what do those boundaries look like. So a boundary, you can set it, but there has to be a consequence, and then you have to enforce that boundary. So I think those are the first steps that one would take in terms of figuring out, okay, setting those emotional boundaries. One other thing I want to say is emotional passwords. Like, we have passwords for everything. We have passwords for our phones, for our computers, for any accounts we have. Everything has a password. And a password is very sensitive. And they even tell you when you're setting your password, whether it's weak, whether it's strong, whether it's medium, right? So we don't want the wrong person to access our information. And so it's the same thing with our lives, our emotional passwords, like vulnerability, like full transparency. We have to figure out whom should have our emotional password. Whom do we give access to have those emotional passwords? Because if they get in the wrong hands, then that could be detrimental to our mental well-being, to our emotional well-being, and honestly, it could be even detrimental to our professional well-being.
I absolutely love that, Michelle, that boundaries aren't about shutting people out, they're about protecting our peace and self worth, no?
Yes, yes, absolutely. And I love that you said that because I think sometimes when we set boundaries and maybe we're hurt or we're angry or we're frustrated, sometimes we set boundaries from that energy. So I would say when you set boundaries, you need to be at a place of peace with yourself. And it's not coming from a place of anger, but it's coming from a place of, protecting your heart, protecting your space, protecting your mind, but not from a place of, I'm angry at you, so I'm going to set this boundary with that angry energy.
Exactly. Now, a lot of people, equate rejection with personal failure. So, how can we reframe rejection as redirection instead of internalizing it?
I'm sorry. Can you repeat the question again? I got the last part of redirection and internalizing, but could you repeat the
Sure.
part before that?
A lot of people equate rejection with personal failure. So, how can we reframe rejection as redirection instead of internalizing it?
Okay. So,
Mm-hmm.
very, very good question. When it comes to rejection, I think it's different for everybody. And I think it's a journey for everyone. So, for example, if someone has experienced their first rejection when they were a child, let's say, 5 years old, 7 years old, and they begin to experience other issues that may be, or other situations that may cause them to feel rejected. And then let's say now they're in their 30s and they never ever dealt with the feelings and how their actions, based off of that rejection. They never dealt with it. There was never any therapy. There was never anyone to speak to, then I think that they're going to have a tough time seeing that as redirection. I think that when people, and I think they will really internalize it, which then will cause major reactions instead of responses. The responses, you think about it, you sit with it, and then you come up with the best solution that is healthy for you. When we react out of hurt, out of pain, out of frustration, out of maybe being confused and not understanding. And so I think that if a person is able to maybe go to therapy or to get coaching or maybe even to have just people that really support and they feel safe with and they're able to speak about those feelings of rejection, I think that if they're getting the proper guidance, they will then begin to see that as a redirection and not internalize it as a personal thing, that it's my fault and I'm not a good person or I'm not good enough. I think it's so important to have support and healthy support from others when we do kind of lose our way, so that we realize that something that maybe someone else rejected us from, maybe that's not something that we were even assigned to, even though we might really think we want it, but it just may not be what was meant for us. And then maybe, as you continue to walk through life, there'll be something else that you'll say, oh my gosh, I'm so glad that whatever that was, that I felt rejection. But look at this. This is so much more connected to what I need and my purpose. So I think that it really depends on the kind of support you have when that rejection happens. I hope that makes sense.
That completely makes sense. Exactly. I agree with that. Now, can you share some daily practices that help rebuild self worth after emotional wounds?
So one is, I think that if you do these exercises, let's just say that just to get started with those wounds, and it's 5, 5, and 5, 5 minutes when you get up, of prayer and connecting to just spiritual peace. Um, and 5 minutes, because it could be a prayer of gratitude. Sometimes when we pray, a lot of times we're praying, just asking for something sometimes, but sometimes we just need to pray for gratitude or pray for others. And then 5 minutes of intentions. Set your intentions for the day. Don't let it be a lot of intentions because it gets too overwhelming. Set 1 to 3 intentions for the day. And then the other one is stretching your body, waking your body up, letting your body know that you are still in the land of the living, and appreciate it. Appreciate your feet, appreciate your legs, appreciate your hands in that stretch. And so I think when you start off with that in the morning, it actually sets the tone for not only your day, or it may set the tone for how you move forward, even if you are in emotional pain. So maybe the next step after that five, five, and five, perhaps if you're open to therapy or you're open to coaching, or you work on your access deny access granted vision board. So now what you're doing is you are fine tuning who is in your circle, because sometimes when we've been emotionally hurt, there are people in our circle that really don't make that better. And maybe they don't do it intentionally, but maybe they're not really living a healthy lifestyle themselves. So I think that's so important to really figure out, okay, who has access to me, and do that daily, because who has access to you one day may not be who has access to you the next day. And I think that's so important. And the last thing I would say is have courage to say no, because a no that you say to something or someone else says a yes to you. And it's okay to say no, especially when you know that that's not really something you want to connect to, even though you might want to make the other person happy. But you can't dim your light in order for someone else to shine.
That's such a beautiful perspective, Michelle, that rejection isn't the end of the story. It's about turning the page to something better, right?
Yes, absolutely. I think when and speaking of turning the page and chapters of your life, um, I am in a specific chapter in my life that doesn't that's a little scary, honestly, and that doesn't feel very good in this moment. I think anytime you're dealing with your health and your mortality, it doesn't feel good when you don't know, when it's the unknown, right? From moment to moment or from day to day. But I've realized that this is just one chapter of my life. And I'm now really honored to turn the page every single day. And sometimes I don't turn the page. Sometimes I stay on that page because I need to. Maybe there's some more healing I need to do. Maybe there's some more um, forgiving that I need to do. Even sometimes just forgiving myself. So sometimes it's okay to stay on the page until you feel that, okay, I'm ready. I'm ready to turn it, because then it will be genuine.
That was truly eye opening. Now, for someone who has spent years giving away too much of themselves, how can they start granting access to what truly aligns with their well being?
Oh, that's such a good question. That's such a good question, because I believe that most people that are giving or that are healers or that just their purpose in life is helping others, usually they pour, pour, pour into others. They give and they give and they give. But
Mm-hmm.
they find a lot of the times that they feel empty sometimes because they're not really having people to pour into them. They're just waking up with that on their mind in the morning. It's like, I got to pour into the world. I got to pour into my family. And then sometimes they truly forget, which seems so simple, but they forget to pour. into themselves. And so I think that the first thing you have to do is I have a book called The Self Files, and I would tell all your listeners to get the Self Files because it literally it embraces you, it loves you, and it walks you through your journey. And the very deep questions that it asks, the very introspective questions that the book asks you, it's not something you can answer yes or no. You have to really sit with it, and you have to be ready not to run from your own truth. And so once you are able to really do that and to really build yourself back up, and when you put yourself first, honestly, it's not being selfish, it's being self-full. I'm going to fill myself up so that I'm not giving from fumes. And then once I do that, then I can pour into the world. And then once I do that, I'm not pouring from a place of just I'm tired, I'm empty. And here's the thing, when you get to a point where you feel like, oh, I'm on half full right now, that is when you stop. You stop and you fill your own self up. And then you can give again, not where you have nothing and you're trying to give from even the fumes of what you have left, because then the result is going to be burnout. You're going to just absolutely burn out. And then you're not going to be able to really pour into anybody else, let alone even yourself.
That's a lesson so many of us need. That saying no isn't rejection, it's redirection towards what actually serves us. That is really great, Michelle.
Yes,
Hmm.
absolutely. I love that because, I think that when you really have a love for people, sometimes you just want to fix it and you say yes, even though you're tired, even though you know you really just need rest, but you want to fix it and you don't want them to be sad and you don't want their heart to be broken. But I think when you really sit down and think about it, did you ask yourself today, is your heart okay? Is your mind okay? Is your spirit okay? Did you start your day off with the self check in instead of the world check in? And I think when you really grasp that and check in with self, there's going to be so many beautiful gifts and surprises and yes, healing. And it's not going to feel good at times, but it is the best gift that you will ever receive. And the best gift that you could ever give yourself is checking in with self every day before you show up for the world.
Absolutely. That's going to surely be beneficial for all our listeners out there. Dr. Michelle, this conversation has been deeply transformative. The idea that we control who and what has access to us, that's a powerful realization that can truly change lives. And to all our listeners, if today's conversation spoke to you, take back your power, reflect on what you have been allowing access to, and ask yourself, does this align with my peace, my purpose, and my self worth? You can connect with Dr. Michelle R. Hanna and explore her work, and be sure to check out her new book, Access Denied, Access Granted, because your peace is worth protecting. Until next time, honor yourself, set your boundaries, and remember, you are worthy of the love and respect you so freely give to others.